bedtime stories for grown-ups. Tonight I have a little story for you called The Nothing. On a little boat, far away from land, in the middle of a great ocean, under a very hot sun shimmering in the sky, where clouds, hot and sweaty, turned north and a thirsty bird flew high in the air, there was a nothing. That's all, quite simply, a nothing. A naught, a nil, a null, a zero. It didn't look like very much. In fact, it didn't look like anything at all. It looked like nothing. It wasn't, isn't, couldn't, wouldn't, and any other "and" that you can think of. It sat there on the little boat and, yes, it did nothing. Now, I understand that it's hard to have much interest in a nothing. And I don't blame you. A nothing doesn't seem to be interesting at all. Indeed, you are probably now quite fed up, especially so if you have read so far and nothing has actually happened. And so it was with the nothing. Nothing actually happened. It wasn't sad, happy, angry or gay. No feelings came out of it at all. It didn't talk, walk, jump. It simply didn't move. It just sat there and sat there. And this was all very fine. Occasionally, a wind would blow and the little boat would drift in some direction, and the nothing would continue to do nothing. Then, one day, a bird flew overhead, saw the boat, decided to rest, and landed at the bottom with an awkward jump. Its feet lurched forward, knocked against a plug that popped out, and the boat filled with water and sank to the bottom of the sea. Nothing and all. That seems to be that. However, as the nothing was nothing, nothing happened, and the nothing sank gently down deeper into the sea till it landed on the ocean floor, where a passing giant oyster, on a whim, ate the nothing with one big gulp. This was all of a surprise. Something had actually happened. The nothing stopped, considered its new surroundings, decided to ignore it, and continued not to be. The hungry oyster was well chuffed at its find and proceeded to mash the nothing with its slimy wet tongue and chew it with its one sharp tooth. It mashed and chomped the nothing, turning it about over and over, rested, started again, doing its best to break down the nothing into edible bits, but it was no good. Nothing had happened to the nothing. The oyster had tried to eat it but couldn't, because the nothing wasn't and wouldn't be. So it left the nothing at the side of its mouth and went on unhappily about its way. Soon after, the oyster thought, tapped its shell, had another think. It was a very slow thinker. Some time later, came to the decision that the nothing didn't at all taste and had to go. And so, under a rock, the giant oyster crept and in secret spat the nothing out and ran away. The nothing found a new spot under this dark rock, was rather pleased, and set about, in a very concentrated manner, not to be. Nothingness. A beautiful bareness, an empty, unfilled space, sitting under a rock, deep in the ocean. Well, very little happened for the next 10 million years, and the nothing was quite content. The odd current of water spun the nothing around a bit, and after 14 million years, some sand was sprayed upon it by a clumsy octopus. And then one day, in the middle of the 15th millionth year, there was a tremendous earthquake. The sea was pushed back, and a great mass of land heaved out of the ocean way up into the sky. and the nothing was left high and dry on a wide, flat, rocky plateau. Now you may think, dear people, that the nothing, being witness to such dramatic events, would be just a little affected, that some sensation must have stirred inside its emptiness. But no, my friends, the nothing was quite determined not to be. Much time passed, and the nothing stayed in the same spot. About 8,000 years later, the land developed strange growths on its surface due to the damp climate, and many creatures ran about its surface living. Tall bushy trees loomed above fat green grasses, and flowers, dripping colour, reached high into the sky. Bubbly pools of rich clear water quenched the thirst of thousands of creatures, and the nothing saw nothing. Life had evolved all around the nothing, but the nothing wasn't. So according to the nothing's thinking, everything around couldn't be, didn't exist, and wasn't there. "I am not," said the nothing. "Therefore it isn't." Well, one morning, a wild seed drifted on a breeze, slid down a hole dug by a worm under the nothing, and began to grow a large, wide mushroom. Its wide cap pushed out of the ground and pushed up into the air with the nothing sitting on top, exposed to the gaze of the sun and the blowing wind. Inside the nothing, an eye opened, looked about, shivered, and closed again. The mushroom grew, bore seed, dried, and slowly shriveled to a wrinkled little ball. The nothing slid down under the long fat grass with the shrinking mushroom, and was quite content again with its place hidden away. However, the next morning the sun rose, warmed the ground, germinated the tiny mushroom seeds, and lots of mushrooms grew under the nothing, pushed it up into the air, and exposed it to the gaze of the sun and the blowing wind. They grew, matured, bore seed, dried, and slowly shriveled to withered little balls. Finally, the nothing slid down beneath the grass and again was happy in this quiet spot. But again, the very next morning, the exact same thing happened. This time, thousands of fat mushrooms grew beneath the nothing, pushing it up into the air underneath the sun. They grew, bore seed, and sank again slowly into the earth, and the nothing one more time slid back into its little rock. On and on, up and down, day and night, for days and days and days, the nothing was becoming quite distressed. All this activity was not supposed to be, should not be happening, could not be possible, but was. Then one day, the mushrooms didn't grow, and the rain came. Long streams of wet rain poured out of thick grey skies, soaking and soaked into the soft earth. The ground became a squishy mess of mucky green grass and watery earth. The nothing was turned over ever so slowly, tumbled and tumbled under and sank deeper into the earth. In a short time, the nothing had sunk far into the ground, leaving only muddy bubbles behind. For a long while the rain poured down, but the nothing, way below the grass, was hidden deep in the earth, and continued with expert precision and great determination not to be. Friends, I'm sure that having read so far and listened to the story, you must be quite exasperated at the absolute nil effect the world was having upon this nothing. How the nothing quite determinedly refused to be, and no matter what happened or came to pass, nothing strove on with its gallant quest of not being. But this is not the end of the story, and though the nothing lay buried in the earth for a long time, surrounded by warm clay, more plants grew. Their roots curled and wrapped around the nothing. The saga is not yet finished. The land had changed, and unknown to the nothing, the ground had slowly heaved up to form a rolling hill. And when a passing tremor from a far-off earthquake happened to shake the hill, its muddy sides slid down into the sea. The nothing was pulled away from the roots, twisted up to the surface, and bounced down the sliding earth. Rolling over and over, the nothing hit the water at an angle which sent it skimming the surface, flying with elegance and grace, where it landed at the bottom of a little boat. The boat lurched forward and was taken by a mild current that pulled it and the nothing away from the sea and out into the calm, calm sea. The boat drifted farther and farther into the silence of a still ocean. The nothing's eye opened and was quite pleased. It found that it was rather pleased, in fact. It closed its eye and continued in a very peaceful manner, forever and ever not to be. Well, the moral of the story is nothing. But you might take more from this story, and that's a fine thing. And I wish you well and the very best with your moral. For me, I just want to be. And that's enough. Our next programme will be about a little everything that met a nothing. Till then.